So, traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim.
To understand atheist and agnostic
And action.
Yay! Happy holidays!
And we're laughing already. So bad. And welcome to another episode of the Holy Watermelon Podcast. I'm Katie.
I'm Preston.
And today, this is our last episode of 2020.
Oh man, I hope the new year is something good.
And I'll just say right now, we're going to take a three weeks between episodes instead of 2. But we will see you all in 2021 and hope it's better than 2020. But today, I think this is going to be our most controversial episode yet. Right?
Yeah, I think
we're only
so.
6 episodes in, but
Yeah, I mean it's a low bar, but we're gonna either launch right over it or vault right into it.
so today we're talking about Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas.
The war on Christmas.
This isn't all going to be about the war on Christmas,
No.
but it's definitely part of our conversation today on, I think, why Happy Holidays should be everyone's preferred term.
See, I don't think it needs to be a preferred term, but if you're the person who shouts at other people for saying Happy Holidays, you're the bad guy.
Yeah. So there's a few reasons I think this, and I think we'll just dive right into them.
All right, so what else is going on in December?
I mean, there's a lot going on in December, which is why I like Happy Holidays.
Happy Holidays is nice and generic.
Very nice and generic. So we have a Buddhist holiday called Bodhi Day. We have a Jewish holiday called Hanukkah.
Which isn't always in December,
That
but
is
it is
true.
this year.
Also, Diwali this year was in November, but I think it can fall in December as well.
That sounds right.
Mm-hmm. Also, the Muslim calendar changes every year. So
Yeah, kind of a lot.
it doesn't fall this year, but Eid could definitely fall in December. We have Kwanzaa, which is an African American. It's not a religious holiday particular, but it does fall in December. We have a Zoroastrian holiday called Zarathustra Diso. We have 2 Hindu holidays, Danu Sanskranti and Gita Jayanti.
I love listening to you say these things,
Is
but
it-
I know that I wouldn't pronounce them any better.
Yeah, please don't. I mean, sure, comment with the phonetics for me. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
send us your homemade MP3s or whatever.
And then we also have other Christian or near Christian holidays. So we have Yule, we have St. Nicholas Day. Epiphany happens in January, but it's kind of related. So there's a lot going on. And there's actually a lot going on all year round, but this is what we call the holiday season.
Because, yay, white Christian-centric American culture. We focus on one thing. We have one bank holiday in December, and that's December 25th for the white Christians. Because let's be real, nobody was thinking about black Christians when they planned this.
And then, of course, there's people who don't prescribe to anything.
Absolutely. Loads of atheists who tend to celebrate bank holidays, which include Christmas,
Woo! It's all we get. It's all we're allowed.
right? At least there's a bank holiday almost every month.
I think except for June.
I think so, yeah. Oh,
Bank-
well.
Bank holidays are a great religion to
Right?
prescribe to.
I think we talked about it in an earlier episode about how there's a faith system built up around money a little bit. So bank holidays doesn't even sound that weird in this context.
Right? So I think that's one of my biggest reasons for Happy Holidays. I'll say Merry Christmas on Christmas, but if I don't know someone personally, I will say Happy Holidays because I don't know what they prescribe to, if they prescribe to anything at all.
Yeah. I'll say Merry Christmas to the people that I know celebrate Christmas.
Absolutely.
I'll often say Happy Hanukkah to the people that know that I celebrate Hanukkah, which
Even
is
as a
irregular.
Christian, yeah.
That as a Christian, I celebrate Hanukkah.
When
It's
I
kind of a
come
big
to your
deal.
Hanukkah party, I say Happy Hanukkah.
Right? I mean, it's the greeting for the holiday. It just makes sense that it's if you know you're there for a specific event, you're going to remember that and say the appropriate greeting, I think.
Yeah.
Like when you show up to a person's birthday party, even if it's not on their birthday, you're usually going to say happy birthday.
I like that because it's true.
Right?
And with that being said, I am conscientious of, I try to be conscientious. I definitely don't, I'm not 10 for 10 for sure. But when I know Eid is coming up, I will try to make a point of texting my Muslim friends, Happy Eid. Eid because Eid changes, I forget. Hanukkah, fortunately, because you celebrate it, I know it's coming up, and I text my handful of Jewish friends, Happy Hanukkah, and they all wish me Merry Christmas in return.
Right?
So
it's almost like being a good friend works out.
Right?
Yeah. It's frustrating that there's so much what appears to be contention around the holidays. Like, there's the obvious Christmas is super stressful, and people want to make that as positive as possible. And so to do that, they start fights over what to call it and how to greet each other.
And we're going to move into, I guess this is probably a good segue, move into how Christian Christmas is. And even the fact that there are non-believers that celebrate Christmas, like myself, that some of these things can get really contentious and exclusatory.
There's gatekeepers everywhere.
Absolutely. So we were talking before we hit play. A great example is we have a relative. I'm not going to say who. We have a relative that, this time of the year, the social media posts start coming. Jesus is the reason for the season. Like, how can you celebrate Christmas if you don't believe in Christ? And it's very exclusatory for me. Part of me is like, I should just not show up one year because they're presuming everyone believes is a Christian. And yeah, I think that's counterintuitive to what this time of year is about. I think it should be about inclusion, and whether you believe that Jesus is the Son of God or not shouldn't exclude you from whatever your celebrations look like, whether that's, anything from Hanukkah to Kwanzaa to Christmas.
It's weird that the secular culture that we've built up in North America finds its roots very strongly in Protestant Christianity. Protestant schools are what turned into our public schools for most of North America. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, it's actually Catholic schools that started the public schools, but mostly it's the Protestants. And so that Protestant morality and the Protestant worldview is the primary source of the way the secularist movement is built up. And so Christmas went from a thing that was very Christian, where most families, when they celebrated Christmas, they read from one of the Gospels, usually Luke, sometimes Matthew, depending on your family and your preference. And there's very few people to do that. I think in my own family, we've done that 3 times. And my family is occasionally, sometimes, pretty into their faith, at least a little bit. And
wow. That didn't sound wishy-washy at all, Preston. Occasionally, sometimes, at least a little bit.
My family's wonderful. But we're not consistent on our Christmas traditions at all. And I think that's actually probably pretty normal for the population at large. There's a handful of things that we usually do, like a gift exchange, which is not specifically tied to Christianity at all. People give gifts. That's what you do when you like people. Pretty often.
What are you getting me for Christmas, Preston?
It just doesn't have to be for Christmas.
What are you going to get me this December, Preston?
That's a secret.
Okay.
But there is also a narrative in the Bible for Christmas gift giving, which is a lot of the justification for the hyper-Christianist Christmas movement defenders, which sounds like a weird set of words to jumble all up together,
Yeah.
but I think you follow me.
I am following you.
That if you're really committed to the biblical Christmas, gift giving still is okay, and so you can't get mad at the people who do it, which is kind of nice.
Interesting. I think it's funny that you say that, you know, traditionally people had, you know, would celebrate Christmas as a Christian holiday. I know here in North America, like Christmas and Easter are the two times churches are filled, and then because everyone feels like they need to be there on those days.
And that's where the churches make their real money.
Right. So my mom was raised Ukrainian Orthodox, and I think it's an interesting take on North America and North American religion and how they celebrate Christmas. But in their house, they called December 25th Canadian Christmas, and that's where you would give gifts and Santa would come. And then they would call January 6th or Epiphany Ukrainian Christmas, and that's where you went to church and the priest would come, and it was this very religious thing. So I think that's an interesting take on it.
Right. There's my church Christmas and my secular Christmas
And my
as separate things.
consumerism Christmas.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that says about Christmas in North America, but I think we can agree that it's not particularly Christian anymore.
Right. I went to a Ukrainian school for several years growing up, and I thought it was really funny that there was a joke going around fairly often that the Ukrainians were the smart ones. They had Christmas once everything was on sale.
Oh.
It's wonderful.
So this always bothers me, and I know it's a tangent for our episode. So we have Christmas Day, the 25th, which is the birth of Jesus. And then January 6th is Epiphany, which is where Jesus became known to the wise men, or, you know, Ukrainian Christmas in the Orthodox Church. Those are the 12 days of Christmas. Those are the 12 days of Christmas, not the 12 days leading up to Christmas, not December 13th. Those are not the 12 days of Christmas. The 12 days of Christmas are from December 25th to January 6th, which is Epiphany, or 12th night. If you're a Shakespeare fan, 12th night is Epiphany, and they're traditionally, that's a celebration where you get to dress up and masquerade and be silly. PSA, those are the 12 days of Christmas. If you advertise anything in your business as the 12 days of Christmas before Christmas, I'm going to be mad at you.
I think it's really kind of funky thinking about how calendars change too. Like that the Orthodox Christmas, not just Ukrainian, but the whole Orthodox group, they stuck to the Julian calendar when we progressed onto the Gregorian calendar. And so we adjusted their calendars and we said, okay, you guys, when you aren't going to adjust your liturgical calendar, that pushes your Christmas into January. So, haha, you have to remember when your Christmas is now.
Well, and this is, I guess this is a good point to make for how Christian is Christmas is how, like, I don't think there's any proof that Jesus was actually born
Zero.
on December 25th.
It's just a long-standing
especially
tradition.
with calendar changes, and I think there have been at least 2 calendar changes since his birth. I read years ago that the closest estimate that they have to Jesus's birthday is actually, they put it in April.
It's so, being a person who worked intimately with the translation of the Gospels, most especially, it was really interesting to go through and really spend a lot of time with the stories and look at the words and whatnot. And the narrative and understanding where, especially Luke, is getting his information. He's the one who tells us about the census, that everyone had to go and be taxed. And that's why Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem. There's no historical proof that there was a census in the years surrounding when it's likely Jesus was born, which makes it a weird thing to have Luke put in the book. But it's entirely possible that he was right and we just don't have that historical data. But even then, that's not why they traveled to Bethlehem. It was almost certainly a wise move on the part of the government to count people when they have already gathered for a thing. People don't like the government. They're not going to go way out of their way, especially traveling 100 miles
On a donkey.
to help out the government that they don't like. That's not going to happen. Look at the way people are behaving this year. And people were not that different 2,000 years ago. So I believe they were traveling for an already existent big deal holiday, a reason when they were expected to go to the temple in Jerusalem from all over Israel or Judea and Galilee. And so I feel inclined to say very confidently it was March or April for the Passover of that year. And of course, the story gets more exciting as Mary is not welcome in the family home because she's pregnant and Joseph says it's not his. So
Scandalous.
Yeah. But that's not where we're diving into the deeps of the story. That's not our point today.
I know there are also a lot of other religious figures that have prominent dates in December.
We were looking at one of the dates you mentioned celebrating in this year was the death of a major figure. And now I can't remember what it was or who it was.
Was that Zarathos?
Yes, that was definitely
the Zoroastrian one.
Yes, the death of Zarathustra or Zoroaster. You're allowed to say either.
Oh, good.
Unless I'm way wrong on this. That's two names for the same guy based on linguistic differences. Yeah, so birth of Jesus, death of Zoroaster, and there are plenty of religious theorists who think that there's some important connections between the development of Christianity and the influence of Zoroastrianism.
There's also, we can't ignore the winter solstice is right around this time.
Absolutely. Yule is something that's kind of interesting. I only found out in my study and preparation for this episode of our podcast that we assume a lot about the origins of Yule and the Yule log, but we actually have no concrete proof that it predates the Christian tradition, even though everybody says that it does. Everybody's like, yeah, it comes from the Germanic paganism. And we don't have any evidence for that. But everybody, as far back as we can find, is like, yeah, no, this is a thing that's been going on for a long time.
Long time. It's interesting you bring up paganism because there are denominations of Christianity that don't celebrate Christmas because they believe it's a pagan holiday. So This comes back to like, we should just say happy holidays.
Yeah, so Christmas isn't exclusively Christian.
Right, so it's not even across the board. So what are some of the reasons that these denominations think it's a pagan holiday?
Well, my favorite is the idea that, Christmas must be Jesus' birthday. We've said it often enough throughout history that that's kind of the focal point of the whole deal.
Yeah.
And people like the Jehovah's Witnesses and Christadelphians that we've mentioned before in passing, they both are very opposed to Christmas. And Jehovah's Witnesses are also really against Easter. I don't know if that's true about Christadelphians.
I don't know. I know Jehovah's Witnesses celebrate a version of Easter.
They call it Passover because they call Easter pagan because the name is from...
I know what you're talking about. Do I have to Google it? So you can say it on record.
It's bothering me that I can't remember how it was pronounced in that part of the world. You got Ishtar, you've got Astara, you've got Esther. I don't even know if I pronounced that right, but that's the way it looks like I'm supposed to say it. There's a lot of different gods in that area have very similar names. They're probably the same person, just cultural shift in their names. Mm-hmm. Kind of weird that there's a lot of contention on this part of it is pagan for Easter, but for Christmas, they're just like, the whole thing is pagan, even though there's all of the things you need in the Bible to say it's okay to celebrate Christmas.
I read one thing. Is it in your notes?
Maybe.
That Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate Christmas because they don't celebrate birthdays.
Yes.
And so it's because it's Jesus' birthday. No, and they don't celebrate birthdays.
Yeah.
And I know Christadelphians don't celebrate birthdays, but I don't know. I don't think that's their reasoning for Christmas. I think it's because Christmas is pagan.
Might be. We'd have to dig a little deeper into that one. My favorite thing about the whole birthday thing, though, is so don't celebrate birthdays, because birthdays are basically the pagan thing that you do to honor the gods. So you honor your God by celebrating his birthday. Jesus, the God of the Christians, can't celebrate his birthday.
No. No, Jesus doesn't get a birthday either.
It's just a little weird. I wouldn't call it a double standard or anything terribly negative. It just feels weird to me that...
Not even the Son of God himself is allowed a birthday.
Right. Oh, you know what, though? That actually does make a little bit of sense. For Jehovah's Witnesses, Jesus isn't God. He's the Son of God, but he is not God. We talked about this before in our monotheism versus henotheism versus polytheism. For Christadelphians and Jehovah's Witnesses, there is one God, and Jesus is the Son of God, who is not divine himself at all. So actually, that feels like that lines up to the whole not celebrating the birthday
We're
of
trying to
a God.
figure it out ourselves.
Look at that. You caught us right here, figuring it out in real time.
Some other very pagan things. Santa Claus and his elves. That's not in the Bible last I checked.
The elves
are in the Bible.
There's no reason that either one of them would be in the Bible, let's be real. The elves, definitely pagan. There's no arguing against that.
No,
that's very non-Christian.
That's very Icelandic.
Yes. However, good old Saint Nicholas is...
Absolutely, yeah.
He is a Christian person. Yeah. He was around about 300 AD-ish.
Really good, Katie. Saint Nicholas was a saint.
What a champ.
Poindexter over here.
At least you can keep up. And so he was known for giving gifts secretly to children all the time. He also used to beat people up when they abused children, which is a really fun part of the story that's been shifted a little over to Black Pete, I think.
Yeah.
So
that's
he keeps Black Pete in. Oh, yeah. Having St. Nicholas's slave Black Pete, and like a little piece of me wants to just call him Peter, but there's plenty of reasons not to make it more ambiguous in Christianity. And Black Pete is keeping the information alive while hopefully we've shifted our attitudes. I really hope we've shifted our attitudes.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading last Christmas some contention over Black Peter, and like fair enough, but
we still have people doing blackface
for
Black Peter, because we don't have a shortage of Black people in our communities that we could say, hey, you want to be Pete for our Christmas thing this year? Which, I mean, asking somebody does feel a little racist, but it's a lot better than asking your white friend, hey, can you be Black Pete?
My mom was beaten by Black Peter.
Yeah? Nice.
She lived in Germany.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like Krampus a little bit better because he's not human. It's less
racist.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously awfulness to Krampus.
Oh.
But it's not properly racist as far as I know, unless there's some backstory there that I don't know, that Krampus is actually one of those horrible, deformed stories of a Jew out to hurt Christians, which is one of those stories that got around a lot.
So back to Santa Claus and this very popular Christmas tradition that isn't Christian at all.
Yeah, he's just giving gifts, not because of any particular calendar necessity, but because he was a nice guy. He showed his love to the kids who needed help, or at least needed some real concrete affection in a very familiar way.
So over the course of time, St. Nicholas
died on us, and we kept him alive.
We kept him alive. St. Nicholas Day is early December, so somewhere these dates kind of merged.
Yeah, we got lazy, and we decided we can only have one bank holiday in December. So,
is that lazy or is that industrious to keep us working?
See, that's a real philosophical question. I like it. I don't have an answer for it, but I like the question.
we have other Christmas traditions that are not Christian.
Absolutely.
I believe the Christmas tree is not actually a Christian.
I don't think there's any reason to think that it's a Christian thing. Interestingly enough, there's a couple of passages in the Hebrew Bible specifically warning against using trees in worship. King Josiah did a lot of reforms to the religion right before the downfall of the nation and the exile. And some of those included tearing down groves that they had set up near the shrines all across the nation that ended up being associated with Asherah, who we talked about before, the mother goddess worshipped in Israel. And King Josiah had these torn down with fear that the worship was wildly inappropriate. And so worship with trees and that being contrary to approved worship has that whole philosophy seems to have been dropped with what I believe is a German tradition initially.
Yes, Christmas trees are German. Wild, the Germans.
They gave us Krampus and Christmas trees. One of those things is far more pleasant than the other. There's definitely loads of hyper-localized Christmas traditions.
Oh, absolutely. My dear friend is big on the gnomes that is popular in Scandinavia. She has gnomes all over her house.
That sounds great.
That's the only one I can think of. I know there's more.
I have a couple of friends that collect gnomes. I don't know if they do it specifically for Christmas, but I know that they have Christmas-themed gnomes in addition to the rest of their collection. They're, gingerbread houses.
Not Christian.
I doubt it. I think it's just a thing.
More Germans. Germans know how to party.
Right? Yeah, it's just a fun thing to do to keep the kids busy. And, if a kid can have a chance to make a mess and not get screamed at, he's going to jump on it. So gingerbread houses all the way. I think I've only ever built 3 gingerbread houses my whole life.
I did help this year.
I did help with a giant gingerbread coliseum a few years ago. That was some good fun. I didn't help a lot, but I helped a tiny little bit.
We were gifted a gingerbread house 2 years ago because we wanted a house and we couldn't get one.
Yeah.
And the year we were gifted it at Christmas, so I didn't bake it. And I was like, I'll build it next year. And then last year I was so busy, I didn't make it. So I still have, obviously we're not going to eat it, but I still have a gingerbread kit and I'm going to make it this year.
Let's be honest. Most gingerbread houses you don't eat.
No, it's true.
It's a waste of candy, and the candy isn't going to go bad, but you're not going to eat it after you've put it on the house.
And you always buy extra candy to nibble while
you have to. Otherwise it'd be hugely depressing. But that gingerbread itself very seldom is eaten.
No. So maybe let's talk about what the war on Christmas is, some examples, where it originates from, and how, because my goal, and our goal for the podcast is to
end the war?
It's to moderate.
How people understand that there is no war on Christmas.
There is no war on Christmas, and maybe why, if you don't know, you should say Happy Holidays, or you should venture to find out what they do celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is this?
If you have friends who don't celebrate Christmas, saying Merry Christmas to them is a little bit weird. Not bad, just weird.
Well, and I will always say thank you. Right? And I think most people would. But again, it's, how do we bridge these gaps between people and whether maybe with a stranger you don't give a shit, but with your friends, like to make that effort to say Happy Hanukkah or Happy Eid or Happy Kwanzaa.
Right.
I think means a lot.
And I think that's
or
why
Happy Holidays when you don't know.
That's, as far as I can tell, the reason why we've shifted towards saying Happy Holidays is that if you, as a Jewish person, keep getting people saying Merry Christmas to you, you feel a little bit anonymous, like nobody recognizes you and that you're almost invisible in a couple of painful ways, I think. And the big move to say Happy Holidays to people is primarily pushed in the retail industry. That's, as far as I can tell, where it really started coming from, because you want people to feel welcome in your shops.
All year round, well, all December long.
But yeah, And so, I mean, even though you're obviously going to be selling Christmas stuff if you're selling things, almost always, there's the need to have all of your customers feel welcome. You don't want to have that slightly alienating anonymity of you have no idea who I am if you're wishing me a happy this thing that I don't celebrate.
Yeah.
Even though usually, like, say Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to somebody who doesn't celebrate those things, you'll usually get a thank you and probably the same greeting in return. Which, I mean, if I say Merry Christmas to you, you can assume that I celebrate Christmas. So you can safely say back to me,
Merry Christmas, Preston.
right? But if I refuse to say Happy Hanukkah to a Jewish friend or neighbor or somebody who I know is Jewish,
You're a dick.
absolutely. I'm a bad neighbor and not a friend.
No.
And that's, I don't know, super frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who think we're being, maybe overly politically correct, but like you said, as an atheist who celebrates Christmas, yeah, to hear family say, well, if you don't believe, you shouldn't be here is exactly that. And I'm not even in a minority, right? I'm a white, we'll call it a faux Christian, right? Because I celebrate Christmas, I celebrate Easter. I don't go to church. I'll eat candy at both instances. Is basically what I do,
Right.
and spend time with family. I also have people say, whatever is definitely isolating. So I can't imagine if you're especially Jewish in Canada in particular, there's honestly the percentage of the population that's Jewish is very small. It's very small worldwide. I know 2 Jewish people and both are non-practicing. I can't imagine how frustrating it would be to, not see yourself represented in the world, especially when it's such a big holiday in your religion.
Right. Yeah, Hanukkah's a big deal. Like, it's not one of the high holy days, but it's kind of a big deal. And it's kind of a bummer that it can go unrecognized so often.
Mm-hmm.
It's very seriously overshadowed by the far more popular Christmas. But if you go into a store and you see a white person, so often now we assume, oh, they must be Christian. We can wish them Merry Christmas. If you see a dark-skinned dude with great bone structure, it's not fair to assume that they don't celebrate Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we talked about this in our last episode about globalism. And I know white Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
I know, not just, pale Arabic people. I know white
folks.
White Muslims. I was going to say Caucasian, but Arab people are actually Caucasian. Yeah, I know North American white folk that are Muslim. And, I mean, India is a great example as a nation. And obviously we have a lot of immigrants and second generation people from India in Canada. India is very evenly split between Hindu, Muslim, and Christians. You can't. I had a job where I worked with 3 people from India. One was Muslim, one was Hindu, and one was Christian.
Nice.
And yeah, so absolutely. It's you can't assume.
Right.
But so where did the war on Christmas come from? Is it legitimate, Preston? You already said it was bullshit.
Yeah, no, it's nonsense. There's no war on Christmas. Employers, as far as I can tell, based on observation, and I'm going to be honest, not a lot of in-depth study, but plenty of observation on just culture and reading plenty of employers' handbooks, working in retail. That drive to say Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas is just to make sure that nobody feels like they're being
left out.
Left out a little bit, but you used a word that has gone out of my mind.
I said isolated.
Isolated.
Okay.
Yeah. I like that word.
Okay.
It feels also a little bit like you're being pushed to do a thing that you haven't made any commitment to do and have no interest in doing pretty often. The need to make a nation homogenized is a problem.
Yeah.
Unity is great, but unity is a lot better when it can also include diversity.
Absolutely. Well, and that's where moderation is important. I think it's also hard to say, especially in North America, that there's a war on Christmas when Christianity reigns supreme.
Right?
Maybe in Saudi Arabia there's a war on Christmas. I
I
don't
doubt
know.
it, though.
I doubt it. I don't know. But when Christianity is the largest religion in the world, it's the most prescribed to religion in the world, and definitely that is the case in North America.
Oh, yeah.
You Christians have a persecution complex. I said it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, we started off our history in the first century heavily persecuted. There was this cult that came out of the Jewish religion and hated by the Jews because they weren't following the rules, and hated by the Romans because they wouldn't worship the Roman gods. And it took a couple hundred years, and then the Christians ended up on top. A couple hundred years went by and almost got squished entirely by the Muslims. And then came back and just leaned real hard on that persecution thing ever since. What's really frustrating, and we'll get into it later on talking about Christian sects, Christians have been persecuted by other Christians way more than anybody outside of Christianity has persecuted Christians.
I'm reading a book right now. It's not related. Well, yeah, it's about Queen Elizabeth I
Mm-hmm.
and her reign. And there's been a few lines in it where they're like, "Oh, God was Protestant today," or "God was Catholic today," and I was like, it just like it makes me laugh. And I mean, it kind of comes back to like prayer and worship and whatever, but it's like they worship the same God, and he, obviously Catholics and Protestants are fighting, and he decides one side should win one day and the next side should win the other day. So I like that. God was Protestant today, or God was Catholic today.
It makes sense if you want to believe that all of your victories and losses are decided by God. I mean, it causes some issues when you look at the greater theology and cosmology.
Absolutely.
But it's an easy enough crush for an awful lot of people to lean on.
So what would you say to someone as a Christian yourself who might feel like Christmas is under threat to them? When Starbucks takes Christmas trees off their mugs or whatever the fuck they do. I don't even know anymore. What would you say to someone who is feeling threatened? Because I think, right, like how do you bring them closer?
Well, first I'd have to start by asking them how they feel that Christmas is threatened. No, I've never heard anybody say to anybody else, "You shouldn't celebrate Christmas," which is a weird thing that I've spent plenty of time with Jehovah's Witnesses, and the presentation has always been, "We don't celebrate Christmas, not you shouldn't," which is a really weird position to hear Christians take, because most of us are familiar with the Christians who say, "You shouldn't have abortions, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that," and it gets really tiring. So having these hyper-aggressive Jehovah's Witnesses knock on the door and being aggressive in their approach, but also actually really reasonable in the delivery is really relieving. But yeah, I've never heard anybody say, "You shouldn't celebrate Christmas." It doesn't feel like there's a war on Christmas.
I have actually heard the opposite in my real job.
Okay.
When it comes to Christmas cards, when, what do you want on them?
Mm-hmm.
And I've probably heard 2 or 3 people say, "It has to be Merry Christmas, none of this Happy Holidays bullshit." Right? Like, it's Christmas, it's Jesus' birthday.
Well, and if that's who you're sending your Christmas cards to, fine, but the attitude still sucks.
And honestly, that's what bothers me more is the attitude behind it than just put Merry Christmas on the card. Because I've definitely done cards where people just like put Merry Christmas on the card. I'm like, cool, we'll put Merry Christmas on the card. But when it's followed by none of this Happy Holidays bullshit, I'm like, you need to watch A Christmas Carol, which is a completely secular Christmas story.
Right?
Just so everyone knows, I love A Christmas
I don't
Carol.
remember any specifically Christian elements in that movie at all. Or, well, okay, I say movie. I've watched several different A Christmas Carol movies. I have not read the book.
Oh, I like reading it over Christmas. I think at the end when he said he's saved, he does say something like "Heaven and the saints be praised," but I think that's about as religious as it gets.
Well,
but
clearly it didn't stick in my mind.
But it was England when Dickens was alive, so it would have been a very Christian country.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's still quite a Christian country.
The Christian overtones would have been assumed by the readers for sure.
Do we want to talk about Melania and the war, which I think is... I just think this is a funny anecdote.
And it's not even fresh news anymore, but it's new enough. It is this year leading into the preparations for the election.
So, I mean, they won't be spending Christmas in the white.
Sure they will.
Will they? When does
it's January 20th is when we get the new president.
I guess that's nice. You don't kick him out of his house before Christmas.
Right?
Even though he should be kicked out.
But, kicking them out of the house early isn't a huge problem because Melania didn't want to decorate. She is recorded, and I read about it a while ago, back when it was fresh news. I actually didn't bother going and watching the video and hearing the audio until a couple of days ago.
Say it out loud, Preston.
I have to read it.
I know.
All right.
But say the word.
The First Lady of the United States of America, Melania Trump, actually said, and is recorded, saying, "Who gives a fuck about Christmas stuff and decorations?" when talking about decorating the White House for Christmas. And CNN and a whole bunch of others blew up with this news that Melania is leading the war on Christmas, which may have been why Georgia voted against Trump this year. I mean, you have to have offended a lot of the Christians who are already worried about a war on Christmas.
Well, and that's why I think it's interesting. And obviously she didn't know she was being recorded, but I think it's interesting coming from a Republican first lady,
right?
When and every president ever, and probably for a long time still, is Christian, and especially like a Republican Christian. It was very interesting to hear her.
See, you say that, but I know most of the presidents were Christian. There's actually a lot of doubt on how Christian Washington was. Donald Trump has been inside a church. I could lose a finger and still have enough fingers to count them.
Yes, but they all have to put on the facade of Christianity.
Yes.
So,
and he does belong to a church. How long he has belonged to that church, I don't know. But
and this is another episode for another day. But we will talk about the no true Scotsman fallacy. So... I mean, Trump is Christian under the no true Scotsman fallacy, right? Like,
he says he's a Christian, so that's all we can do.
That's all. Yeah. So, like you said, another discussion for another day on why Westboro Baptist Church are Christian.
Right? Just because they say they are, I guess that's enough.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be at the end of it. Anyway.
Right. The problem is, just leaning into that fallacy bit a little bit, the people who say they are versus the people who act like they are, one makes a bad name for the other.
Oh, absolutely. But it goes back to the story you mentioned in our very first episode of the Good Atheist.
Right.
Right. So, any final thoughts?
Just the idea that there's way too many holidays in December. You shouldn't be making assumptions about people that you don't know very well. I have a good handful of Wiccan friends and other pagans and that I hang out with occasionally. Well, okay, honestly, not this year because this year has sucked, but they're within my circle of friendly contacts. And there's loads going on this month, loads to celebrate. Christmas is just one of many options. And there's a tradition that I noticed when I lived in New Jersey for a little while. They put candles up in their windows.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've seen like 2 houses do that here, and I don't think I ever noticed it before I went away. But there's a couple people that do it here. And this idea of bringing light into the darkest time of the year is kind of nice. For Christians, it's very strictly tied to Jesus. Jesus, the light of the world, come into the world for Christmas. in a time when we need that light, when it's all dark for so much of the day. It's kind of cool. Similar but wildly different tradition among the Jews of Hanukkah. Hanukkah's ultimately about the rededication of the temple, but there's an awful lot of emphasis on that fight for the liberty to celebrate their religion that led to the dedication of the temple. And then there's the miracle of the oil, which is represented in the lampstand and the candlesticks today, of more light.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, that Yule log we mentioned before, that there's still arguments about when we started that and who we stole it from. But light is such a big deal. We like fire a lot.
Huma, fire.
Right? That's what makes us different from the apes, who are also using boats and spearfishing. Yeah, 2020's been a weird year.
Okay.
So fire is great. And whatever you're lighting on fire this year, peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecy had fulfilled itself.
God is near.
Hey, Preston,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I want for Christmas?
What do you want for Christmas?
I want you, our congregant, to share our podcast with one friend.
That would be a wonderful gift to me and to you, I suppose. I would love to have this podcast grow and spread knowledge and factual information and the ability to talk about religious
and
topics.
laugh about it.
Absolutely.
So
There's not nearly enough laughter with religion.
So the greatest gift you can give this Christmas is the Holy Watermelon podcast to a friend or a family member, and it would be a gift to us as well.
I agree. What a wonderful idea.
Thanks.